Athletic greatness comes in all shapes and all sizes. It doesn't come naturally, but is achieved from hard work, diligence, and adversity. Along the journey, there's opportunity, and there's always struggle. There is triumph, and there is defeat, and there is always a story behind the glory. It's not hard to say that M.L. Woodruff put Parkview Baptist baseball in the minds of high school baseball fans after 23 playoff appearances and a remarkable 11 state championships. And those titles came in the 1980s, the 90s, and the decades of the 2000s. Parkview's Eagles were 22-0 in all state semifinals and finals in which they played.
He's very spiritual. He was very dedicated to his players, to whatever job he's doing, just puts everything he can into it.
You know, kind of the old saying, if you build it, they will come, you know. And then I remember Coach Woodruff telling me one time, he was like, I was kind of ready to retire before I did, but we just kept winning.
Coach M.L. Woodruff.
Hey, Lynn
It is great to see you.
Great to see you.
Congratulations on this spectacular outing here at the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame.
Thank you so much.
Have a seat. Let's get to know you a little bit better. Anybody who follows high school baseball already knows you and your accomplishments, but I'm curious because I'm quoting now from something you said. This is a story about God putting me in places I never belonged. I never wanted to be a coach, but I needed a job. So I became a coach. Not just any coach, I might add. So tell me about the genesis of your career.
Yes, Lynn, I wanted to be an elementary PE teacher. I have a PE degree, not a kinese degree, but a PE degree. I love working with young kids. I was scared of older kids and I didn't want to teach them because I thought they would disrespect me. So my first teaching job was at Freshwater Elementary in Denver Springs. And it was the greatest job of all. I taught for 1 year, elementary kids, but I didn't know this until the end of the school year was the guy that I took his place as the elementary PE teacher, he went somewhere else that year and took somebody else's place, was on a sabbatical. He was the principal at that school for a year, and he came back to his job, and it left me without a job.
Seniority took over then.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're out of a job.
Yes.
What happens next?
So I get a phone call from the Livingston Parish School Board saying there was a job at French Settlement coaching basketball and teaching 6 different history classes. I said, I don't want to do that. I'll go do something else. And then later I got another phone call and says, hey, we got a job opening at Doyle High School in Livingston. It's you'd be an assistant football coach. I hadn't played football since 7th grade. I would be the head baseball coach, and I had played at LSU. Mm-hmm. And I would teach co-ed physical education to 7th and 8th graders. I said, I'll try that. I'll try that.
So from there to Parkview Baptist.
Well, before I got to Parkview, when I was still at Doyle, my first year I was coaching, the parents were getting together. My assistant coach told me, says, they don't think you're going to make it through the year. They think that the kids are going to run you off. So I was fearful and scared to death because I didn't want to coach older kids or teach older kids because they would disrespect me.
So you're like 23, 24
yeah, I'm
years
23
old
years
now.
old.
Yeah,
exactly. So we started practicing and playing some games and stuff, and I had a catcher that was a good athlete, but when he threw the ball, he went down, backing up, had a good arm, but he couldn't throw anybody out. So I knew that I was going to have to coach him. I knew that I was going to have to try to change his throwing motion. But he's about 6'3", and I was about 5'9" on a good day. But I went home and I practiced. I got down in the stance I'd never caught in my life. I brought him to the field early that day, and I started to work with him and showed him how to be short out of the glove. And you know what he did, Lynn? He listened to every word I said. And at that point in time, I just felt in my spirit God saying, Emil, you can do this. You can do this. So that was really first time I really felt called like I might be able to coach.
So if I can use the word calling, you felt something at that moment that this is where I need to be.
I did. I felt like I had some gifts, talents, and abilities inside of me that I didn't know that I had. And I got a chance to live those out through coaching.
30 years of teaching and coaching, 603 victories, National Coach of the Year. Countless young athletes from the Baton Rouge area realized this coach was a mentor, a father figure, and to many, a lifelong friend.
I remember that game days were the days that we showed up and we got to have fun. Would he hold us accountable? Absolutely. But the practices and the preparation, the lead up to those game days were always the most strenuous time for us. I mean, we showed up to games and it was easy.
We had crazy things like, it's a great day to get better. Leave it better than you found it. And we just instilled those as a kid. So the expectations were high, not based on talent level, but based on just how we did things. So I say this, winning was not what we did. It was an outcome of how we did it and who we did it for.
He told me an interesting story when we spoke about, artificial turf is great, but he always liked grass. And one of the things that you miss when you don't have grass and real dirt is you don't have to tarp your field. And tarping the field is kind of like the ultimate team exercise. And you wouldn't think about that as being significant, but he thought it was.
When I think of Parkview baseball, I think about a program that was designed thinking about a championship victory. There wasn't anything that we did in this program that did not have our end goal in sight. That was why we were here, right? We were here because of the legacy that was started back in the mid-'80s that Coach had cultivated for the better part of 20 years.
This was a period of blue ribbon baseball out of Parkview Baptist High School. And so many years in a row and so many years of winning and winning and winning and winning, that doesn't happen by accident. What was it in your philosophy that brought these guys together and brought them to their full potential?
Well, before we got to the point where we won regularly, we lost a lot. So my first year of coaching at Parkview, we won one game, lost 20 and tied 2. And then we started improving, went 20-5, and then the third year we went 24-1 and won our first state championship. But some of the things that I think we did to build a program was our great care for kids. And I found out as a coach that not only was I gifted in some areas, but God gave me the ability to look at young men and look for the gold and go in there and get it. Go in there and get those skills, those abilities, those talents out of young men and help them become better. And then not only looking for skills that help you win baseball games, but look for things about their character, who they were, who they could become. And that's what I figured out as a coach along the way, that I was gifted that way to be able to do those things. And then how to build young men to become together, because the world we live in today is so separate and everybody goes their own way, and it's a very selfish world we live in. So I enjoyed trying to build teams together, and I coached 24 years out of the 27. I was athletic director for a couple years, but it was so fun, and seeing kids buying in. So the other thing would be ownership, getting the kids to own the program, where they had buy-in. So you've read crazy stories about me and working on fields, and I had a lawnmower when I was 6 years old, and we used to do crazy things like line up on the infield, like we were on a tarmac of an airplane, line up shoulder to shoulder and pick up rocks. And I would tell them, you realize that one rock could cost you a district championship. So the details were what we tried to instill in our kids, and most of them bought in most of the years.
The State High School Athletics Association, State Baseball Coaches Association, and Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame have inducted him into their halls of fame.
He's much more than 11 state championships, much more than his winning percentage reflects. He is a guy of character, a guy of integrity, and somebody that taught the game of life through baseball.
But if you ask Coach M.L. Woodruff, those accolades will never compare to the sense of purpose he feels by also assisting in spiritual guidance to young people.
I mean, you see the banners and the signs on the wall for state championships. Coach can't go play in the big leagues, he can't go throw pitches anymore, but he can lead young men, and if that's the measure of success, well then he's certainly at the top of that list.
If you were to do it over again, even with the initial apprehension of getting into coaching, would you make that same choice? Or would you go off in another path and try to use the values that you have in another way?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that. But I can say that God directed my paths, and I don't think there was any other path. I think that God orchestrated the whole story to start a baseball program at Parkview Baptist School, to start a sports ministry at Streamwood Baptist Church, chapter 2. And then chapter 3 will be starting Bible studies in high schools for coaches. So I think all those things were put in step, orchestrated by God for His glory. You know, we could have won 12 state championships, 13. What is really the difference? So the difference was impacting the lives of others. So as a baseball coach, I could impact 50, 60 boys. When I went to sports ministry, I could impact thousands of kids. And I felt like that was the next calling for me, and the coaching led me to the next step.
The things that you've talked about here today, would they apply in 2023 to high school kids? Would the same benefits be available to them if coaches did it that way today? And some do, but are we in an age where we can't rescue, if you will, those athletes?
Right, so it's a broken world we live in, and sports are broken. So for me, getting into sports ministry, it was seeing that sports were moving further away from God rather than closer to God. Because God gave us this sports for pleasure, for fun, and also draw us back to Himself. So if I was going to do it over again today, Lynn, I'd coach parents. I'd spend more time talking to them about how they coach their kids. A parent has a great place to watch their kids play sport and see it as something they can do to step into their lives.